Okay, Tim Cain, Outer Worlds vertical slice. I don't really know what to expect with this video of his. Like maybe it's something interesting me. I don't know if there's much I can say about this. So if this doesn't end up on YouTube, then it is what it is. But maybe there's something that I can say about vertical slices as a whole and comment about how I think that was a good decision, or maybe I don't think it was a good decision. So we'll see.
Hi everyone, it's me,
Hi,
Tim.
Tim.
Today I have a very special video to show you. It is the Outer Worlds vertical slice. Before I get in, let me give you some context. And actually, before I give you context, let me thank Obsidian and especially Mikey Dowling for arranging this and letting
Yeah, this
me
is cool.
show this to you.
You don't often get to see these.
I want to show you the vertical slice for many reasons. And let me explain what a vertical slice is first. If you watched my production stages video,
Yeah.
which I link below,
I don't know if we did.
I talk about the different stages that a game goes through when it's being developed. The vertical slice stage is when you make a level of the game or a map, or in this case, an outdoor map with a few connecting maps. I think there was a town map and 3 dungeon maps. A vertical slice has to look and play like the final shipping game.
Yep.
Now, you may ask, how can you do that? A third of the way or halfway in to the game. Well, you don't show every feature and you don't show every piece of art.
Yeah, it's usually that, content takes the most amount of time to make, right? It's that creating the systems is certainly a challenge. Creating even one map is certainly a challenge. But for a game like Outer Worlds, you had multiple locations and multiple planets you could visit. So you just don't make those. You make one planet, in this case, or, one map that represents one of the planets, probably. And that will showcase every little piece of the game. So like he said, town and settlements, dungeons, it's going to have quests, it's going to have NPCs. Obviously, as a way that he's probably going to mention here to help budget and determine the scale of your game and how much time it's going to take. AGT Experience. What does the old man have to say this time? He's talking about the Outer Worlds vertical slice. One thing I will say too for vertical slices that I think is pretty important is to nail down your pipelines. And that can help you determine how much time it takes to implement an asset or to make a small town, to make a small dungeon. So it's not just that it has to look and play like the final thing, but that you should have some things in the background ready so that when you jump into creating your alpha, you have a good set of standards and practices that you're going to use moving forward.
So that's how you can do it. Now let me remind you that this isn't a prototype. Prototypes are made to test game mechanics even before you have art. So often they're gray boxed. Some of the creatures may be T-posed people, or it may be whatever creatures you have available. The levels are just roughly laid out in untextured polygons. Contrast this to the beautiful corner, which is usually not even a whole map, just a part of a map, which is why it's called a corner, that has the final artwork in it. So you can walk around and see what the game will look like. But there's no play in it. There's usually no creatures, no combat, no usable objects. It's just you can walk around and see what the world's like.
I've never heard of that, but I like that from a certain perspective. It's like a half vertical, it's a non-gameplay vertical slices. Here's what our world's going to look like. It can be done entirely by the art teams, right? And by level designers and level artists who are adjacent to that. And that way you can just determine what the game looks like. I like that. I do like that. Beautiful corner. I like that. It's cool.
Vertical slice is sort of both of those combined together and done after those. It is a playable map that looks and acts like you expect the game to when you ship.
Thanks, Anomalies.
Now, let me tell you some cool stuff about what you're about to see. We made this vertical slice 1 year into the project.
Yeah, that sounds about right. 1 year into the project for vertical slice. If you noticed, if you take a look at what we have, let me pull it up somewhere. Where's our documents? For Cauldron Chronicles, we have our budget here, and it shows roughly 1 year, in this case 9 months, to make a vertical slice with most people on the team. Now, Outer Worlds, I would say, is a slightly slightly larger game in scope. Certainly the team at Obsidian is bigger, so I can understand why that would take about 1 year to make. But that's a pretty good timeline for making your vertical slice going from first playable. Now, if that includes first playable, so he said if it was 1 year from the start of the project, that's not much time, but he does have a much larger team than 15 people. I don't know what Obsidian's team for making Outer Worlds is. How many people made Outer Worlds? About 80 people. So yeah, that makes sense. What's a horizontal slice like? Horizontal slice would just be the entire game, but kind of like gray boxed. So I would kind of consider that to be somewhere a little after vertical and into alpha. You would have your horizontal slice. Or you could even say that that is what your alpha would be. But there's different definitions. I would say like every game company has its own definitions for each phase, and you need to communicate that with like your publisher or your investor so that they know exactly what to expect at each phase of development. So when I talk about what like our alpha and beta would be considered for Golden Chronicles, that's entirely dependent on what we call it, and it's also dependent on how you release the game. If you go into early access, your alpha and beta are going to look a hell of a lot different than if you have a full release planned, no early access period.
2 years before we shipped. Let that sink in for a minute, because what I'm going to show you, this vertical slice was so good that rather than just throw it away, we made it a shipping map in the game. It's Roseway. So if you play the game, you're gonna be seeing Roseway.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly how it should be. I think that's exactly how I communicate what a vertical slice should be as well. It should be good and it should be usable in the final build because it is your standard, right? Minecraft, do you ever use Git large file storage? I have so many tips. I've never used it. I've never used Git. I've always used other versioning software.
Keep in mind, the team had 1 year to learn
Lazy things
Unreal, in this case Unreal 4, and then make this game. So they had 1 year,
Oof.
and this is on an IP that we were spinning up, that we hadn't decided everything at the very beginning
That's
of that
tough.
year. We had a lot of things ready for them to go, but they had 1 year to learn Unreal, to learn how to code in it and to code the mechanics, to make concept art, and then figure out how to get that concept art realized in 3D and Unreal 4. This is a lot of work.
That is a lot of work.
And it's a testament to how good the team was that they could do that in 1 year. I've seen teams and heard of teams that couldn't do this after 2, 3, or 4 years. So go team.
Well, especially if you have to learn a new engine, you have to learn how that engine handles, especially like its code. And it's very easy to fuck up your code architecture early into development if you're learning a new engine, right? So that is scary. Yeah, it's scary and it's impressive that they were able to do that in that much time.
Now, when you watch it, you're going to see some differences. The UI wasn't completed, mostly because some of the mechanics you're seeing were literally just ready and available a week or two before Vertical Slice was due. So there's no time to make a real UI for it. Also, hair
standard.
wasn't ready. I think you see hair on Ellie. And that's about it. So there's a lot of bald NPCs in the game. But so much of the other stuff was done, and you will see it. We have guns and creatures and particle effects and maps and scenery and buildings and map transition and just so much stuff. Now, I will point out that we didn't have any companions available besides Ellie and Felix, so you only see them. But the way we hid that from you is we didn't let you go aboard your ship, the Unreliable, which is the only place you can swap companions. We also didn't have crafting ready. So by not letting you go on the ship, we didn't let you get to the crafting table that's in the ship. And we just didn't put any crafting tables in the Roseway level. So it wasn't noticeable you couldn't craft because you never came across somewhere you could craft.
That's not bad. You know, usually when you think, oh, it's a vertical slice, you should have those things in the game, right? You should have crafting and hair, I would say, are things that probably should have been completed at that point. But it's also not... It's not too terrible that they weren't. If everything else is in the game, it's okay to know that your vertical slice is not going to be a 100% perfect cake. You might have some things that are a little messed up, right? But that the goal is to have all of that in the game.
So finally, this is the actual vertical slice milestone that Obsidian sent to Private Division in September of 2017. It's called Project Indiana. That's what Outer World was known as. This is the Milestone 9 video. We had 6-week milestones. 9 times 6, 54. This was 1 week or 1 year into the game. Super impressive. So now let's take a look at the video. Narrated
6 weeks
by
milestones
Outer Worlds
is pretty
designer
common.
David Williams.
Hi, my name is David Williams. This video goes over some of the features and highlights of the vertical slice build for Project Indiana. The vertical slice takes place on a section of Terra 2. The player lands their ship to investigate a distress call that was cut off. In this build, we were able to inject humor and world building into our environmental storytelling.
Punishable by a fine of no less than 10,000 bits.
Roseway is an example of a living town that's been recently devastated by an attack.
Yeah, this looks nice.
The player is free to explore the surrounding environment.
The tickle slice.
There's lots of little things to discover and major POIs to orient and attract the player to new locations. You can even discover their secret lab. Shh, don't tell anyone.
This is their secret lab? So much for subtlety.
Environmental storytelling allows the player to learn about the world and story without excessive exposition.
Yeah, sorry I'm not saying much. I'm just, trying to observe various things.
The player can play the game with a variety of playstyles. We have built some example archetypes for the vertical slice. Here are some highlights from the combat archetype. We have a new heavy weapon called the Heavy Machine Gun, which is a high damage weapon with a large magazine. Called shots have been streamlined to make them easier to use and more rewarding. We've revised tactical time dilation to allow the player to shoot and use their abilities during TTD to make it more interesting to use, as well as easier for players not as skilled in FPS gameplay. Melee is fast and brutal.
Captain.
And you can notice that even while certain things seem unrefined with the combat, those are things that will be iterated on. So while it's, again, ideal to have the best combat system at the end of your vertical slice, it's very wrong to assume that after only 1 year of development out of 3, you'll have the entire combat system perfected and looking and feeling great. Because it's like, what are you going to do for the rest of the 2 years? So it's good to have the basis of what you want to achieve, have it looking and feeling all right, and then just polish it up as you continue development, right? So I would say mostly things look great, they just lack that polish, and that is something that will come throughout the rest of development. Usually done in beta phase.
We've updated our enemy deaths to show more visceral feedback: murder, death, kill, gibbs, fire, electricity, and boom. The leadership archetype focuses on empowering your companions. Players have access to 2 leadership abilities.
Take them down.
Inspiration increases allies' damage.
Shot, Captain.
I'll tear your limbs off.
It's like Starfield. It's like Starfield, but this is the vertical slice. And this was just kind of how Starfield was on release.
Determination increases allies' armor.
Oh boy. I mean, Bethesda's never been good at combat, though. Maybe one day. Off
The
my
leadership
copium.
skills can be mixed with stealth, called shots, melee, and any of the other player abilities. The dialogue archetype focuses on manipulating other NPCs through conversation choices and dialogue combat abilities.
You're saying they walked into a communications tower, turned on the transmitter, held down the talk button, and sent half a message by accident?
The player talks to Anton, who is the lead scientist in Roseway. A dialogue character can use Intimidate or Persuade to get him to reveal to you his top secret research.
Any worse? All right. We were tasked with formulating a new and improved dental gel.
A dialogue character can solve Cassandra's problem not through violence and fighting, but by persuading the security team, Porter, to leave.
He did mention that they didn't have hair finalized yet at this point, so they're here to see a lot of bald people.
I gotta believe that all we done will mean something to the company, to Doc Crane. That effort will make up for mistakes. I trust that we all end up where we're supposed to be. That all the variables come together in the end. Here.
I forget who this guy is. I think he's the lead designer or something, but he does a good job of walking you through. You have to imagine that you are a publisher in this case, right? This video is not meant for players. This is meant for publishers to understand what's in the game compared to what they were promised and how what's in the game looks and feels. So it is like it's very dry, I would say. It's not something that is meant to be cinematic or necessarily exciting, but rather just more informative.
E-card. It'll get you access to the whole place.
And I think it's doing a pretty good job at that.
Full stakes, people. We're heading back to town.
A dialogue character will have the most options on influencing people in conversations.
You questioning my motives, my compassion, has unsettled me. All I cared about before was Byzantium. I believed getting there was everything, that my life would finally have meaning.
Like, it seems obvious, so, RPG game, you can persuade, but you have to show that, especially to publishers, so that they can see how that affects the gameplay. It seems like it's something that should be pretty obvious, but it isn't always obvious.
You're right. And what's worse, I've always known it. But there's nothing to be done. This is the life I've made for myself.
Dialogue options have meaningful consequences. You can convince Anton to leave all this behind, or even to kill himself.
Rip Anton. Hey, handgun ammo.
The stealth archetype allows tactical gameplay to avoid confrontation and danger. A sneaking player learns about awareness level in nearby NPCs and can use NPC barks.
It's funny you mentioned Starfield GT experience, because when remembering the stealth system in that, holy shit, stealth was bad. I don't know how they fucked up stealth so bad in Starfield, but it was one of the worst stealth systems I've ever seen in a game.
And audio.
It was non-existent, essentially. The game would have been better had they just not included it.
Why don't you come on out? Don't you want to play with us?
The stealth character can complete objectives without even being seen.
Alert. Employees return to designated workstations for safety.
But when the stealth character decides it's time to fight, a sneaking character can use their ambush attack for a massive damage bonus to start combat.
Having trouble? Please more entry box. Please return to designated workstations for safety. Goodbye.
Yeah, this is nice. This is a very well made vertical slice. I think it showcases the game quite well. Very, very neat.
You know who I am?
Negative.
Negative.
Okay. I think that was pretty darn amazing. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it gives you some insight into what a vertical slice for a game looks like. And I hope you're really impressed with what this team could do with an unknown engine and a brand new IP after just 1 year.
Yeah. I think for me, you know, I take a look at it and I'm like, well, there's things that I would improve for a vertical slice, 100%. I would do a little bit more work on some of the UI. I would probably want to have hair done, have the crafting system, show a bit more about quests, if you ask me. I mean, again, this could have been, though, what the publisher asked to be shown, but still, I would want to show some of that for me to consider my vertical slice complete. However, I think what Tim says here, which is a new team with an unknown engine, is way harder. I've worked in that case. I've worked with a team that had to switch from Unity to Unreal, and we had to do that in about the time frame of a year. And we were relatively new, a lot newer and fresher in terms of experience than this Obsidian team was, and it was a struggle. I know the programmers had a really tough time getting to a viable point, and by the time that we had to have our vertical slice completed up, I'm telling you, it was not a vertical slice. This is way, way better than what we had. So I'm very impressed by what they had after 1 year for a new engine. That's not easy. I think this is a great example. Another great video by Tim. I'll send the link in chat if you guys want to see it yourself. And if you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching that. Bye-bye. See you next time.